this has been a video that I've been trying to make for the past year. And the reason for that is because over the past year, I've gone through so much changes in terms of my career, in terms of my skills, and just knowledge that I really wanted to make a video about it. And I wanted to discuss how I came to acquire those skills, how I realized that I'm not actually as skillful as I thought I was, and also just discuss the professional industry and the settings of that professional world really. Now, I've actually been working as a software engineer in one way or the other, whether I was an iOS developer or a security engineer or something like that, for the past 5 years. And I've worked in three different companies now, including the one that I'm currently in as an engineer. But even though I was working for 5 whole years, it wasn't up until this last year that I can honestly look into the camera and say that I am starting to become a software engineer. And it might sound weird because, again, I mentioned and I continue to mention that I've been working for 5 years. So how is it that in that last year, I can start considering myself an engineer? And by the way, I'm just considering recognizing that I'm transitioning to become an engineer. I'm not even fully there yet. And this is basically what I want to talk about in this video, how 1 year of working in the right company really changed so much about what I think an engineer does and what the knowledge that an engineer should have. So without further ado, let's actually get started with this video. In this video, I'll discuss my expectations in working in the professional world, reality, how it actually ended up being, uh, expectations of myself, how I thought I would perform, how I thought I will behave in a company like that, and then how I actually ended up performing. And finally, just some advice that I think is important to know based on the experience that I've had. And yeah, let's get started on the video. So I'm gonna continue this video by first talking about expectations that I had on myself prior to joining the workforce and how that changed and also give you a reality of it. And then I'll talk about the expectations that I had on the industry and the workforce and also how that ended up changing as well. Now, the first thing that I want to mention about myself and what I expected entering this new company is that I thought I was going to be an expert. I had previously worked, like I mentioned, for 4 years. I worked in two different companies. One company as a telecommunications engineer. I used to write Python code that would manage some other stuff. And then in the second job, I was an iOS engineer that worked on creating iOS apps for research. So it was pretty cool. I thought I had learned so much and I thought that I was ready to really be an expert in another company as an engineer. And I joined that role as an iOS developer. And for the first time, I had to work with, there was 200 people working on the same project that I'm working on or working on the same app that I'm working on. And to give you some perspective, in all the previous jobs that I was an engineer in, it was usually actually just me working on that specific project. So I would have the project from start to finish and I would create the app from start to finish. And that's why I thought I was an expert because I could finish an app from start to finish on my own. But I joined that company and the first thing that I realized is that the amount of tools I don't know how to use is insane. Things like TeamCity and things like even just GitHub using it so that I can contribute with 200 other people is something that I've never done before. And it was extremely shocking to know that something so simple, something that I've been using for a really long time to push my code and get my code, all of a sudden became something so difficult to do. Just someone else's comment might create a conflict. And the first time when I saw a conflict, I was like, what even is that? How do I manage that? So that was a bit crazy. The second thing that I realized is that my solution to a problem can't just work. And previously in my previous jobs, things would work. It would work really well. People would see and they would like it. But the way it was implemented, and this is something that I learned now, is it wouldn't be able to be scaled. Let's say I leave and five other people come and they want to work on the same solution. It would have been very difficult for them to continue after my work. So my solutions, yeah, they were working and they were working perfectly, but it was very difficult to actually scale them up. The solutions would not be consider any accessibility. So things like, what if a blind person, and that is a true test case, by the way, what if a blind person is using the app? What if someone who's colorblind is using the app? What changes can I make in the app that would allow the app to be accessible by the most number of people, including people with just different screen sizes or different iOS versions or different countries, because some countries actually limit some usage in some apps or some phones. So that is definitely something that I realized, okay, well, I'm not an expert because I don't know how to create my solution. I don't know how to take a professional approach to create my solution. And something else that I realized is that I have never actually been properly introduced or exposed to other people's code. Now, up until that point, like I mentioned, I would be the only one working on that project. And even if I would see someone else's code, I would see it just for reference, or like I would see it on like Stack Overflow as like some examples. But I never actually saw that standard that's currently being used in the industry when it comes to writing code. Whether it's how to name your variables, the number of spaces, empty lines, just naming something so that anyone in the world can look at it and straight away understand it is something that I never really cared about. I always wrote my code on my own, and I should have realized, because sometimes 5 days later, I would look at the same code and I wouldn't know what what it meant until I read it again. But working in this place for a year, I realized that I never actually was exposed to professional code, and now I'm starting to get there. But looking at all those people write amazing code and seeing how different it is to my code really did show me how intermediate I actually was. Still, it's not enough to make something work. It needs to work properly and it needs to look good while it's working. And so, not having enough experience with different tools, not having um, um, enough experience to make the code level up to a specific standard was the second thing I noticed. Being able to contribute and collaborate with people from different disciplines. So sometimes I can get I can be communicating with a tester who's not a programmer, but they're required to test the app, and just being able to properly explain to them what they need to test is a challenge that I realized. And also communicating with, again, non-programmers or non-engineers that are working on the same project, and that can be marketers, it can be designers, it can be business analysts or product owners. All these people are people that do not need or are not technically skilled, and that's because their job doesn't require them to do so. But I need to be able to communicate to them and explain to them what I'm actually working on without troubling them with the technicality of it. And that is something that I really had lacked. So together with all those like things that I just mentioned, it removed my expectation. My expectation was that I'm going to be an expert, and very quickly, as soon as I joined, I realized how much I actually knew, which was so small compared to how much I'm still learning. And even after 1 year now, there's so much that I know I need to learn. So definitely not an expert. Something else that I had expected, or I thought I was good at, is handling feedback. And throughout uni, my degree is a 5 year degree, and throughout my other previous jobs, I would receive feedback and I'll take it really well. But the level of feedback that people give right now is insane, because, like I mentioned, it's the first time I contribute my code with other people, and sometimes I would raise a PR or I would publish my code, and it can be reviewed by anyone who's working on the same project. So, like I mentioned, around 200 people now have the ability to comment on your code and give you feedback. And those people are people that I've never, sometimes people that I've never met before, people that don't even work in the same building as I do, or even the same state as I do, yet they can still give feedback. And it makes it a bit tricky, because now all of a sudden, as soon as I publish my code, and I'm not exaggerating, sometimes I get up to 30 different feedbacks on my code, because again, I'm just starting. And none of those people mean any harm, I think so, but they would comment on things as small as, hey, you've named this wrong, or maybe you should use a plural, to something like, your code's not going to work in the next year, or this is completely rubbish. And just being able to take feedback in a way that you don't get offended by it from someone that you've never met before. But more importantly, more important than just not getting offended, is actually knowing what to fix and what to work on once you receive that feedback, is something that I thought I was much better at than I actually turned out to be. So when I first started, getting feedback would put me down a lot, and sometimes I wouldn't even want to work on the project anymore. But now I'm starting to actually take that feedback. I'm like, oh wow, that's cool. I'm gonna work on that, and I'm gonna fix it, and I'm going to seek more feedback on it. So definitely one of the things that I expected turned out not to be true. Um, Last thing is, I thought I can ask for help, and this sounds so silly, but knowing when to ask for help is very important. You don't want to ask too early, so that you look like you didn't actually try, and you don't want to ask too late that you're wasting time and wasting other people's time. And again, this all stems from working with others. Now that I work with others and other people wait for my code and I wait for their code, it's very important for me that when I'm actually stuck, I need to know, all right, I need to stop trying on my own. I need to reach out to someone else and ask for help. And I never actually had to do this much because there was no one usually to ask for help. And at the same time, I would create things in my own way. But now that I'm working with other people and it needs to be written in a specific way, asking for help is definitely something that I thought I would know how to do, but turns out I didn't. And now I'm learning how to do that. So this is the first part of this video, which I discussed expectations on myself. Let me know what you think about this, and what maybe you had some similar expectations as well. Now I actually want to talk about some of the expectations that I had on the workforce itself, on the industry. So just to give you some information, I do work at a bank as an IS engineer, and here are some expectations that I thought will be true or that I had before joining and how it actually ended. So the first thing is I thought that everyone would not do this much of mistakes. I thought everyone at this level, just like I thought I was an expert, I thought that everyone else is an expert as well, and they are. It's just my definition of what an expert is was wrong. These people do mistakes all the time, and I guess the best way to prove it is that if they wouldn't do mistakes, then there wouldn't be a feature on GitHub that allows you to give feedback. The whole reason for it is that we expect people to do mistakes, or we expect people to not be up to the standard all the time. And I just thought that everyone would just like publish code and it would work straight away. Sometimes it does, but most of the time, people have a lot of feedback to give to other people, and it's a good thing. It makes us all get better. So that's something that I expected didn't turn out to be true. The second thing is that I thought things were much quicker. Like, I thought at that level of a company, it is a huge bank, it's number one in Australia. I thought at this stage, once someone says, you know what, we want to add this feature to an app, it gets done straight away. But I quickly realized that that's not the case at all. Sometimes things will take months. Sometimes it could take a year for a change to actually take an effect, be tested, be developed, be designed. And this is something that I actually felt quite comfortable. Because it means that products do take long time to be published, so they're more tested, they're more used, they're more analyzed throughout that time. So it's a good thing. But for some reason, I really did think that things get published like all the time. Like you ask for it, the next day it's published. That's not the case at all. Even if you actually complete a specific feature like before time, there is a specific release date. And I think it's the same like that for other companies. There's a specific release date where all the features go live, and it's not like, all right, this feature is now available, we're going to release it. There's a specific date throughout the year, and that's when all the releases happen, or most of them happen. The final thing that I want to say is, like I mentioned, the last expectation, like I mentioned, I was working on my own for the previous years. And so working with others or coming into this company, I thought that my responsibility is going to be huge. I thought I was going to be taking care of so much things. And honestly, the easiest way to put it into words, I thought I was really going to lift like the responsibility. But in a place like that, with that much people working, the responsibility and the tasks get distributed a lot. Like it really gets diluted, if that makes sense, to so many engineers. And so you actually end up working on like a very specific tile or a very specific view or a very specific feature rather than taking a whole page to work on. Even features get separated and split and given to people so that multiple people have work to do on that specific feature. And again, this is sort of like the disadvantage of working alone all these previous years, because I always had the whole workload on myself. But now that I'm sharing it with other people, the overall outcome ends up being much better because a lot of people worked on it with different perspective, different quality, different views and things. And I also get to be more comfortable. I don't need to worry about having to finish everything on my own. You get to work with other people. So that's definitely an expectation that I'm so glad ended up being false. And that is that I would carry much more than I actually can. These were all my expectations and all what came true. The final thing that I want to actually talk about is now just some advice. And it's just going to be one advice. Maybe it will turn into two. But the main advice that I want to give is that this is probably going to piss a lot of people off. You don't have to give your 100% to everything. And to be honest, I don't think you even can. Now, I watch all those people, motivation speakers, whatever, they go up there and they say, from the moment you wake up, you need to give 110% to everything. That's just not impossible. And it's not good. Find whatever is important to work on right now and give it your 80%. You can't even give everything your 100%. And I think that's the approach that I'm taking. And it's the approach that a lot of people in the industry actually advise me on is that, all right, let's say you've identified 8 things that you need to work on. Don't work on 8 things 100% because you can't, and you're going to fail in all of them. Pick one thing that you actually find is important and work on that priority. And once you pick the thing that has the highest priority, you can start giving your 100, or you can try attempt giving what your 100% to. For example, right now, these are the things I'm working on: GitHub, writing better code, and um, just time management. I think for me right now, the high thing that I'm trying to give priority to is GitHub, because GitHub allows me to push my code to others, and also receive their code to work on. So without it, I can't do anything. And so I'm giving my 100% or 80% attention to that. And the rest can take 10 and 10 or whatever percentage, as long as I can actually get the highest priority item done or completed. So if you have a lot to work on, wake up, decide what actually has the highest priority and work on it. You don't need to give 100% in everything. You don't need to achieve the best in everything. Some things can definitely wait. And if you're still studying, it's the same thing. You don't need to get a HD in every subject. There's some subjects that you can definitely just be okay doing a credit in, or even a pass. And some subjects, you might aim for higher. Anyways, that's it for that video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you liked it. Make sure you do leave a comment below and let me know what you think and what your experience has been. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.